Hi everybody. This new video is going to be a little bit different. We're going to go over first-person shooter movement. I'm going to try to do this quickly, but of course you can pause and slow down as necessary. But we're going to enter the brand new input system. We're going to add some player look with the mouse movement, and we're going to link that all to different elements of our code. So without any further ado, let's get to it. Starting out, I have a few things set up inside of my code. Everybody should be at a point where you can set this whole part up yourself, but you'll notice that I've got a ground, I have a player, and I've got a couple cubes. I just added those so that I have some reference. And one quick important thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the main camera onto the player. And you'll notice that the main camera is currently far away from the player. To put it in the same exact position, I just dragged it into the player, and then I'm going to go 0, 0, 0. So you'll notice that the player camera is right over here. I'm actually going to move it up just a little bit so it's about eye level. And there we go. Everything that we see is going to be from the player's perspective. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the brand new input system. In order to do that, there's a couple ways, but one of the easiest ways is to do this. Go to Window, click Package Manager, and then from Package Manager, I want to do packages inside the Unity registry. I'm going to look up Input, and there it is, the input system. I'm going to go ahead and install that. And important thing for all of you guys, when you install it, you're going to have to restart your well, not restart the computer, but you'll have to restart the entire project in order for the input system to actually take place. So that's going to take me a minute, which means I'm going to pause the video and restart after it has already begun. We are back with the new input manager installed. Now, first thing I'm going to do is to set up my inputs. I'm going to go into Settings, and I'm going to right-click inside of Settings and create a new Input Actions. That will not show up unless you have installed the manager and reset the system. So I'm going to click on Input Actions. I'm going to go ahead and name this Player Input. Double-click so that I'm opening it up, and here are my new input actions. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new action map. I'm going to go ahead and name that one Player. One really cool thing about the action maps is I can enable and disable different action maps, and if by any chance I'm making a game like Grand Theft Auto where I've got driving, walking, flying a helicopter, I can have a whole bunch of different action maps for each of those. But I'm just going to be focusing on Player. Now, the first one I'm going to add is going to be movement. And in order to do that, right now I'm clicking on Actions, and the action type, this one is going to be a value. Button control is going to be a vector 2. Our movement's just going to be in the X and the Z axis. And then after I click on both of these, I'm going to click plus, and I'm going to add a new up, down, left, right composite. I'm going to go ahead and call that WASD. And I'm also going to rename the new action movement. And I can also delete that first key binding because I'm not going to actually need it. Now in WASD, I'm going to add, well, WASD. So under path, I'm going to click that. And you guys can't see it right now, but there's like a listener above. I want the first one to be W on the keyboard, and then I'm going to do the same thing for down. This one's going to be S on the keyboard. Left will be, let me find it, well, A on the keyboard. There we go. And right is going to be D on the keyboard. Perfect. And I can add a few more. If I want to do the arrows, similarly, I'm going to make up the up arrow. I'm going to click listen. There we go. Up arrow. Down. I'll make the down arrow. Left. I'm going to make that the left arrow. And right will be the right arrow. So far, quite easy. And then generally what I would do is if I have a controller, I would add another one. And this one would be set up to my controller. I would just plug it in. And then on the up, down, left, right, I'm just going to use the listener to add every single one. But I don't have a controller currently selected, so I'm just going to ignore that for now and just keep these two for my movement. And while I'm at it, I know I'm going to need a couple of extra ones. I'm going to need another one for look, so I may as well add that right now. This is a new action, and I'm going to call this one look. And similarly, look is going to be a value, and it's going to be a 2D vector. And then under my bindings, the one I'm going to use is a mouse delta. And similarly, I could do the exact same thing with a control stick, but for right now, since I don't have a controller attached, I'm going to just keep it at that. And I'm going to add one more action, which I know kind of seems like it belongs in movement, but I'm going to make it a separate just button click. That's going to be my jump. I'm going to add more actions for things like my fire, since this is going to be a first-person shooter. But for right now, I'm just going to focus on these ones. Under jump, how about I just make the space bar the jump button? I can make whatever I want, but I'm going to make the space bar the jump button. Okay, now everything is basically set. All I have to do is save all of these assets. So I can click on Save Asset. Another nice one that I use sometimes is I'll just select autosave, and anytime I make any sort of change, it will save automatically. But either way, I do need to save my assets. I'm going to go ahead and close this, and next I'm going to click on Player Input, and I'm going to generate a C class. This is very important for anything to actually be connected. This generates my actual code, which will make it work. So I clicked on the check mark, and I click Apply. And sure enough, very quickly, there is my entire script for doing my player input. The next thing I'm going to do is add a new script, which I'm going to put inside of a new folder. So I'm going to go over to Assets and create a brand new folder for my scripts. I should always do this just for good organization. And then I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to create a brand new C# script, which I'm going to call player input. This is kind of my input manager, but input manager specifically for my player. But I named the script, and I'm going to open it up. And everybody, I apologize. I just did a really, really horrible error. I accidentally, without thinking, named my script the exact same thing as another script, which I definitely do not want to do. Let me just go ahead and delete this one because I don't want it named the same thing. Sorry about that. I'm going to create a new one, which I'm going to call Input Manager. All right, successfully deleted. So create a brand new C# script and call that Input Manager. There we go. Now I'm going to open up this one. Here is my Input Manager script. So starting out, of course, I'm just going to delete the default information, and I'm going to add some instance variables. And the first one I'm going to want to add will be a player input variable, which accesses the player input script. I'm just going to call it player input camel cased. A general helpful thing is to make sure you Pascal case all of your classes, and then just camel case all of your variables. But this will access the input script, or the player input script. And then next, I'm going to, this one, do a public variable, because it's going to be used across scripts. Player input dot player actions. Player is what I'm going to name it. And this right here is my action map. Oops, sorry. That was supposed to be a comment. Connect to action map. And then next, I'm going to do some stuff on awake. Now, In previous videos, we usually do all of our starting stuff inside of the function named start. However, I'm going to use something a little bit different. This is going to be awake. And the difference between start and awake is awake happens as soon as the program opens, and start happens as soon as the game actually starts. So awake is going to happen before anything else. And I want that because this is going to be all my input stuff, and I want it to connect to all my other scripts. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the player input, and that is going to equal a new player input. Sorry, a new player input. And then next, I'm going to, just for simplicity's sake, make the player actions. This is going to make it so that I don't have to type it nearly as much. Player is going to equal the player input dot with a capital P player. So what that's going to do is that's going to connect to the player script. If I had a driving script, I would do something similar, but I only currently have the player. And that is just about it for this script at the moment. The next things I'm going to do are I'm going to add the player movement script and a player look script, and then I'm going to attach all of it to the input manager. So let's do that next. I'm just going to save this right now, and I'm going to create a new script, which I'm going to call player movement. Once it's done loading, right click, create a new C# script. I'm going to call this player movement. And I'm going to go ahead and open that up right away after it's done loading. There we go. All right, now inside of player movement, I'm going to add a few things. First of all, I'm going to add a few serialized fields. These ones are pretty standard, I think, when it comes to writing a movement script. One of the variables I'm going to want to be able to change is called speed. And then I'm going to add a few other player variables that I'm going to want to change. And those ones are going to be jump height or jump force. How about I call it jump force? And I'm going to start off as something pretty low. How about 4F? And then here's going to be a really important thing. I'm going to add a character controller. So private character controller, and I'm just going to name it controller. And I'm going to add a vector 3, which I'm going to call player velocity. But then, since I'm using a character controller, it's important to know that character controllers do not use Unity's physics engine, which means that I'm going to have to add physics, including gravity. So I'm just going to add a quick private variable, serialized field, and I'm just going to call it gravity. And we all know gravity as 9.8 meters per second. So it'll be negative 9.8 because it's going to be pulling us straight down. And then next, let's go ahead and add our start. Next, on the start of the code, private void start. We are going to grab the character controller. And of course, that character controller does have to be attached to the character, otherwise this will not work. We'll add that in just a little bit. Before we do that, let's go ahead and add our movement method. Now, for the movement method, usually what we end up doing is we'll write a private void, But this time we're going to go a little bit different. We're going to do private void. Instead of update, let's make a new one. I'm going to call it process move. And inside of process move, we're going to take a vector 2, which is going to be our movement input. And I'll show you how we connect it in just a little bit. And then from there, we're going to create a vector 3 called move direction. And that is going to equal a new vector 3, in which case we are going to go forward. So input.x. And actually, you know what? Let's write this just a little bit different. Instead, I'm going to write input.x times transform.right plus the input.y times transform forward. Whoops. There it is. And then real quick important thing is if I tried running this code right now, what would end up happening is if I went diagonally, that vector is going to be larger and I'm going to move faster in diagonal. So to fix that, I'm just going to put this inside of parentheses and write dot normalized. And that will normalize the direction. This is just calculating the move direction. Calculate. There we go. All right, and then next, we're just going to move that controller. This one will be really simple. But it would be controller.move. Since we're using a character controller, we can do that. And we're going to move in the move direction. However, I'm going to add a couple of quick things. First of all, since this is a, well, I want to move at the typical time, and I want it to be the same on everything. I'm going to multiply that by time delta time. Otherwise, I'll move at the frame rate, and it won't be the same for everything. We'll also move super, super fast if we do that. But times time delta time, we're going to move a little bit too slow, so I'm going to multiply that by the speed, which of course can change. And that will just move my character in the correct direction. And then next, to add gravity, I'm going to go ahead and add that right now. I'm going to say player velocity.y plus equals, so I'm going to add to the gravity. It's going to equal gravity times time delta time. That is adding gravity in the y-axis, which hopefully you guys remember is the up and down axis. Z-axis is the forward and backward. And then finally, we're going to, and let me just move this a little bit. We're going to move the controller in that gravity. Player velocity times, we'll do time delta time again because of the fact that the gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared. And then final really important thing is, it's just applying gravity. If we are on the ground and, well, right now, if we're on the ground, the gravity is just going to keep compiling. It's going to keep getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And then eventually when we step off the edge, we're going to fly off the edge really quickly. So to make the gravity a little more constant, I'm going to change it where if the player is on the ground. So to check if our player is on the ground, the easy way to do it if we're using a character controller is write controller.isGrounded. That is a built-in method in the character controller. And I'm going to add one more quick thing, and the player velocity in the y is less than 0. The reason why I'm adding that is because if I am jumping, I don't want this to apply. So if the player is on the ground and not jumping, if that's the case, let's set the player velocity in the y-axis to, we want to go down a little bit, but we'll keep it as a constant -2. That way I don't go flying off an edge when I move. And actually, that's going to be everything for processing movement. We're going to add another separate function or method, which we're going to call jump. Oh, and I forgot about this. I want to access process move from another script. So instead of making it private, I got to make it public. And I'm going to do the exact same thing here. This one will be public void, which I'm going to call jump. And inside of jump, it's going to be really, really simple. We're just going to do it if the character is grounded. That way we can only jump off the ground. We can't just jump anywhere. Player velocity.y equals, and previously what we tended to do was just make it equal the jump force. However, since we don't have gravity, if we just apply the jump force, then what's going to happen is we're going to get some like weird kind of results. I want to follow a nice, good-looking parabolic arc. And to do that, instead of doing jump force, I'm going to do math f dot square roots of the jump force times gravity. And since gravity is negative, we're not allowed to take the square root of a negative value. So let's just multiply that by -1. F. And that jump will look a lot smoother than if we just did velocity y equals the jump force. All right, next. I currently have two methods that don't actually like connect to anything yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add these into the input manager. Right now they are both public, which is good. So I'm going to click on the input manager, and inside of the input manager, I'm going to add some stuff inside of the update. So private void update. And actually, I didn't think about this, but I'm going to have to access the player movement script. So to do that, I'm going to call that as a variable. This one will be private. Player movement. And I'm just going to call this, well, it's movements. How about I just call it motor? And then inside of my awake, I'm going to want to access it. So in order to do that, to make it really simple, I'm going to go motor equals get component player movement. That'll get the script connected to the player. And then inside of the update, I'm going to call motor, and then I'm going to call the name of this function, which again has to be public, otherwise I can't actually call it. But motor.processMovement, or process move, and that is going to equal the player.movements.read value, which is a vector2. And that's it. That will call process movement with the movement input. And I almost forgot, there's one more thing that I need to add in order to make this actually work. This is a private void on enable. And what this is going to do is it's actually going to enable the player input. If I don't do this, then nothing's going to actually work. And it's really, really simple. I'm just going to write player.enable. I know it seems like it should intuitively be there, but for some reason it is not. And I'm going to do another one, private void on disable. And that will do the exact same thing, player.disable. And a real big reason for this is because, say my character is going into a car and I want to go into a different movement type, then I would disable the player movement and enable the driving movement. But that's just some simple basics for it. So next I'm going to save my script, and this is a very good time to run it. But before I run it, I'm going to have to add some things to my game. So let me go ahead and open up my screen, and then on the player I'm going to have to add the character controller, and I'm also going to have to add these two scripts. So add component, character controller, there it is. And then I need to add the input manager script. Let me just drag it there. There it is. And add the player movement script. There that is. And now if I go ahead and run it, I should not be able to look yet. However, I should be able to move left, right, backward, and forward. And if I test with the arrow keys, it works, and with WASD, it works. And if I were to add a controller and put that into the input, that would also work. So let's go ahead and go to the next step, which is making sure that my player look actually makes my player look in different directions. So to do that, we'll add another C# script. So go to create C# script, and this one we're going to call player look. And then once it is done creating it, I'm going to go ahead and open up that script. Just take just a second. There we go. And inside of player look, I'm going to add a few more instance variables on this one. The first one is going to be our camera. I'm just going to call it cam. I found out if I call it camera, then something else already named camera is going to be overridden. So definitely do not name it camera, just call it cam. And then I'm going to do another serialized field, and this one is going to be a float, and that's going to be the X sensitivity. And let's default it to something. How about 30F? I found out is a pretty good one. And we're going to do the exact same thing for the Y sensitivity. Anybody that plays FPS games could tell you that, or FPS games on the computer, can tell you that changing the sensitivity is very, very important for making sure like you have good control over how you're looking and aiming. And the final thing, actually, I think I'm going to go without adding the final thing. Oh yeah, final thing. I'm going to add another global variable, which I don't need to serialize. This one is going to be called X rotation. And that's about it. So first of all, starting out on my start, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cursor lock. And what that's going to do is once I start the game, my cursor is not going to move around anymore. And the real big reason for that is to prevent you from clicking on anything that you're not supposed to. When you're in the game, you just want to be able to click and shoot. You don't want to accidentally click on some sort of button, like something down here. So we're going to lock mouse to prevent clicking outside of game. If you don't like it, you can disable it, but it's definitely going to be valuable when you actually start playing. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to do something just like what we did inside of our movement. Instead of doing update, we're going to do process look, and we're going to take in that vector 2, which is going to be the mouse input. And to do that, I'm going to write float mouse x, and that is going to equal my input in the x direction. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing, float mouse y. So those are going to be my 2 input values. And then next, x rotation, I'm going to make that equal, and I'll tell you why I'm doing this in a second, but mouse y times time delta time times the y sensitivity. And I know a lot of you guys are probably asking, like, why rotate in the x and we're using like the y values? Well, the real reason for this is because we're going to want to add something next, which is called clamping. Rotation x equals math f.clamp, the x rotation. And here is going to be like my difference in values. I'm actually going to go negative 80f and positive 80f. And really what that does is it makes it so that my x rotation, I can look down 80 degrees or up 80 degrees. However, I can't fully spin over, because if by any weird chance I were able to fully spin over, then suddenly everything would be inverted and strange. So that's why I'm focusing on that y-axis for my x rotation. And it's really just to prevent me from looking too high up or looking too far down. I don't want to be doing backflips inside my game just by looking. And then next, I'm going to transform where the camera is looking. So cam.transform.local rotation. And I want that to equal the quaternion, which is a rotational calculation, dot Euler. I know it's spelled Euler, but it's actually a famous mathematician named Leonard Euler. If you ever hear anybody say Euler, it means they know nothing about mathematics. But this is an Euler rotation, and the direction is going to be the x rotation, and we're only focusing on x, not y. And this will apply our camera movement. And then next, we're also going to want to rotate our player's body so that when they go forward, they, well, go forward from where they're looking. So I'm going to do, let's see, transform, which is the transformation of the object, the current object, dot rotate, vector 3 dot up, times, and this will be the mouse x times time delta time, times the x sensitivity. So this will rotate my player. And that is actually it for the look script. So next thing I'm going to have to do, since I'm using this input, is I'm going to have to write that into my input manager. So I'm going to go into my input manager, and I'm going to add another connection, which will be private player look. And I'm just going to call that look. This will add access to look script. And similar down here, under motor, I'm going to say look equals get component player look. That will get the script. And then I could put that in the update. However, generally what I like to do is I like to have the look happen after the movement. So in order to do that, instead of update, I'm going to do private void late update. Late update. And inside of it, similar to the player movement, I'm going to write look dot process look. And then again, similar, it's going to be player, but instead of dot movement, it's dot look, read value vector 2. All right, there it is. I think that is absolutely everything I need for all my player movement. Oh, except for one final thing. I forgot. I never actually added the jump. So to add the jump, this one is going to be a little bit unique, but I'm going to access that code right there. In order to do it, I'm really going to only have to write one line of code, and here it is. I'm going to write player.jump.performed. So what that does is that creates an event for when the jump button is actually pressed. What I want it to do is I want it to plus equal the CTX and I want to map that to motor.jump. I know that is a strange looking function, but what CTX actually is, it is callback context. So when jump is performed, we will do the motors.jump. But that's all CTX is. So yeah, again, when it's performed, we will do this function. And that is about it. So now I can actually jump as well. This is a perfect time to, again, go ahead and test our code. Make sure you save everything. And make sure you have all of these important elements. And let's go ahead and jump into the code and see how this works. So everything is starting. Oh, I forgot, I will need to add the player look script onto the player because that didn't exist yet. But once this is done, I'm going to add the player look script onto my player. And there we go. I have the input script, the movement script, and the player look script. Make sure you don't have doubles of the script, otherwise you're going to have some sort of issue. Oh, and then this is also going to be really important. For the camera, there's a couple ways I can do it, but if I don't add the camera right now, then I'm going to have issues. So go ahead and drag the camera in there. All right, now we are good to start. And what should happen is as soon as this starts, my screen locks, which it has. Awesome. And I can look around and I can move forward, backward. I should also be able to jump, which I can. Awesome. All right, mine's a little bit clippy. So let's see, to fix that, gosh, really all I need to do to fix that is restart. It should be fine this time. All right, there we go. If I turn, I can see. And that is really absolutely everything that we are going to need. So next we'll look at adding like a weapon into our hands. We'll keep building off of that, but that is everything that we need for our player movement. I hope that was helpful. Make sure you like and subscribe and keep coding. Have a great day.